So today I wanted to take the opportunity to just discuss the reasons why I love comics. But I thought that was a little narrow coming from just my perspective, so I invited my wife, Michaela, to join me.
Hello, I'm Michaela, and I am a librarian and a Women and Gender Studies adjunct lecturer.
We come from two different perspectives when it comes to comics. I am more of a hardcore collector, and she is, I don't want to say casual reader, but selective reader.
Yeah, definitely reader. Not really into collecting.
I like to collect things, and you like to not have things.
Yeah,
So,
I don't collect anything, so...
So it's not that you don't care about collecting comics specifically.
Yes.
So I thought we could just kind of go back and forth and share some of the reasons why we love comics and where the differences are and where some similarities might be. So I'll go first, and from what we just talked about, I know this will definitely be a difference. I love the hunt of searching for a book, whether it be on eBay, Instagram, or ideally at a local comic shop, where you're digging through bins and you're going up through the numbers, and that like you're looking for a specific issue, and it may not even be a key issue or a money book or anything, but it's something that you are looking for your collection, and you can't find it for whatever reason. And one example I'll give is the final issue of Gotham Central, which is not really worth much of anything. It's probably $1 book, but I could not find it for the longest time. And when I found it at a convention randomly in a booth, I was just like thrilled because I'd been looking for it for so long. So to me, that's like, there's a great satisfaction in that moment of finding something.
I guess, yeah, I get that. I get that same kind of satisfaction when I know I'm going to be able to read something.
Yeah.
So, like when I get my holds in at the library, and I know I can go pick it up. Yeah, it's knowing and that I'm going to be able to see it, or finding it on the shelf is another thing. And that's why when I've gone to comic shops with you, it hasn't always been the most exciting for me, because I'm not as interested in seeking as I am in reading, which I know you're not supposed to just like read them cover to cover in the shop. Like I don't think that would be very, very much appreciated. Whereas,
right.
I see something that looks interesting and I think like, oh, I want to read this.
So what's something that you really love about comics?
What I love about comics is their accessibility, I guess. I struggled with reading as a kid profoundly for the first few years of school, and reading ever since then has not been easy. It takes a long time for me to read things, and obviously I read a lot. I still do, and I made it through grad school and all the reading that involved. So, I can do it, but...
I mean, you read, 70, 80 books a year?
Last year was 90.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, well,
That's amazing.
But I still get anxiety when I know a book is long, and I still have that sense of self-doubt where I don't think I'm going to be able to finish it. There's a lot of satisfaction in finishing comics, especially trade paperbacks, where I'm getting a full arc, even if it's not the whole story, but I have a good beginning and end, and I know I can get through it, and I can usually lose myself in it better, which I think is true of any kind of visual storytelling. I don't really fall asleep reading graphic novels or comics, but I fall asleep reading books, novels all the time, and and it's not because it's not interesting, it's just that
it's more visual stimulation.
Exactly. Yeah. I just feel like I take it all in at the same time.
Outside of comics, I read approximately 0 books per year.
I think the visual cues are really strong at evoking emotion, which is really the biggest thing I'm looking for when I read things. I generally want stories that make me feel something.
Sure.
Not that everything I read is super profound. It's really not. But I mean, that is kind of the ideal, is that there's some emotional reaction to it, and having a visual to do that is much easier to make that happen.
It's a very unique form of storytelling where the words and the pictures complement each other to form a single message that you're reading. A comic really, a good comic at least, really utilizes the medium to its advantage to tell a story better, I feel. I think this is a perfect segue into the one, I guess, technically comic I'm going to show in this episode, which is Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics. This is a must-read for anyone new or old comic fans, because
I've never read it.
Here you go. It is told in comic form, and it is about the art of comics and how comic storytelling works. It's really a remarkable piece. So check this out. So another thing that I love about comics is, once again, something that we've established you aren't going to identify with as much, is having a collection and cataloging that collection and tracking the collection. And there are certain books in my collection that are very important to me. Even my first video, when I talked about those books from my childhood, where they're books that are literally worthless, but I would never get rid of. And so just flipping through my boxes of comics and seeing my collection as a whole.
Yeah, and okay, so I don't relate to collecting issues on an individual level, but I do relate to the idea of building a collection, and I've done that in my capacity as a librarian, and I'm still working to do that. Trying very hard to do that. It's harder in an academic setting. But yeah, I mean, I get excited by the prospect of knowing that eventually there will be a collection of trade paperbacks and graphic novels and things like that for the students at my college to look at and enjoy. So, I do have that kind of excitement. It's just that it's not like a personal ownership. Like I don't really know how to explain it.
No, I think that makes sense. And we were just talking about this before we started shooting, where a lot of people still don't take comics seriously, even though they have become quite mainstream with all the movies and TV shows and everything like that. It's a medium that has become to sound pretentious, the zeitgeist.
Pretentious.
Did I nail it?
Yeah, I mean, like, libraries now all have a collection.
Certainly public libraries.
Yeah, and they're among their highest circulating materials, typically.
Yeah.
But even in that setting, even in my profession, there is a lot of unawareness of what they are. Certainly from a content standpoint, because typically everything gets filed in with young adult or kids.
Yeah.
Which is...
including The Walking Dead and...
Preacher,
which is...
shocking.
super appropriate for all audiences.
And in the attempts that I've made to bring graphic novels into the college setting, I mean, I've done research into it, and the studies show that students who struggle with English as a first language, English is not their first language, so ESL, students who have various learning disabilities, graphic novels appeal to these people because it has the visual and the written to give them,
Right.
the ability to understand context and the writing. And from another study, I think it's this generation is one of the lowest pleasure reading groups. Like, I read for fun every day. And
I would estimate 80 to 90 books a year.
and it's calming. It's a nice activity. It's a fun activity. I think it makes people more flexible in their understanding of the world and each other. And for there to be this massive group of people who are just completely left out of that is kind of devastating. So that's why, like, I just can't understand why people are not more interested in getting things like this into the hands of...
Because they're for babies.
Yeah, the legitimacy of the medium is something that I fight every day.
Yeah. Obviously, I mean, that's something that I identify with when, you tell people you collect comic books, they're like, oh.
You child.
Yeah, that's baby stuff. You play with bath toys too? I don't take baths.
Gross.
What's gross?
Stewing in your own juices.
Blech. I'll edit that together. Don't show Preacher to your kids.
I don't know. This is one of those tricky things because we all have a lot of different parts of our identities.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely consider reading a big part of my identity, but this particular aspect of it, for some reason, I don't. And I think it's because I've never had a good response to saying to a stranger, or maybe not even a stranger, but just somebody new that, like, I read comics. But when I have kind of waded into that, it's been like, well, what do you read?
Yeah.
Tell me what you're reading. I need to know.
Right.
It's a test of my legitimacy, I guess.
As a fan.
Yeah.
That was a perfect segue into my kind of final reasoning for doing this video was to kind of talk about that idea of legitimacy. Because I've been collecting comics for a long time, and you hear it either directly or indirectly that certain people are the wrong type of fans, or they read comics the wrong way because they only buy spec books, or they only read trades, or they've never read Mouse, or they've never read Ghost World, or indie comics. So like, oh, you only read X-Men? Well, you don't really appreciate comics for the art form that they are. But I think that's really bogus, because I think that if you're in a comic shop, or you're at a Comic-Con, or you're reading a comic book at your house, if it's in an issue or a trade or on your iPhone, we're all enjoying it for basically the same reasons, right?
Right.
And it's a bummer that we all, like, in this hobby that gets crapped on sometimes, and I certainly know that I got made fun of for reading comics.
It's not respected.
Yeah.
In the way that it should be, and the way that it deserves. I mean, you say Mouse, and like, they won a Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about this notion of comics as trash, and I still hear this, and I still read this idea that it's the breakdown of literature and reading and all that. But I know English professors who assign the graphic novelization of Pride and Prejudice because it's just so much more accessible and better for their students to read and enjoy than the actual text of the novel. And these are people with PhDs in literature, so they're not
schlubs.
Yeah, and that's really frustrating to me, and that's, I think, what I've always struggled to push forward, is that they're as legitimate a medium for conveying story. I
think that, people misunderstand it a lot. So, the medium of comics, I mean. And, like I was saying, I got I don't want to say bullied, especially through that age of like 12 to 16 where everything is so important socially.
Mm-hmm.
That like when people found out I read comics, it was like you got a snicker and you got made fun of a little bit. And the fact that within the community people do that to each other, like we saw this band, it's a doom metal band called Yob, and we both really love them a lot. And the lead singer, Mike Shett, I think his name is how you pronounce it. Scheid, maybe.
We love you, Mike. Sorry, we can't get your name right.
There's a really great interview with him that I think he much more eloquently says what I'm trying to say, but he put it into a very succinct statement at the show where he said something to the effect of, I think it's amazing where we can all get together, this group of people who have so many records in our collection that are the same, and be in this moment together. And I feel like that's what comic fans should be. Like, we should appreciate the fact that, like, you shouldn't look your nose up at someone because they read Saga, because, like, you probably maybe read Saga too. Like, if it's just their only thing that they read, doesn't mean that they love it any less.
Yeah, kinship is a big thing with this. Having people just understand something that you love. Understanding something that you love in a way that you don't have to explain.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. And it's the same thing with metal. You and I both know this. That, like, there's just some people who can't get their head around listening to it and enjoying it.
Yeah.
So when you meet people who do, it's special. It's very special.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel about this, especially as a woman with an interest in comics. I mean, there's fair representation, but
not compared to,
yeah,
same thing in metal.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like an outlier in a lot of ways. So, meeting other women who enjoy this kind of stuff or have read some of the series that I've read, it's really nice to have that. And it just feels like special.
Yeah. So don't crap on people for liking comics differently than you.
And don't grill people about what they've read to try to see if they're a legit fan or not.
Yeah. Because if someone says they love comics, you just say,
Cool.
That's
Me
cool.
too.
Me too. Nailed it. Thanks for joining us. Hope you'll come back again and see some other content.
You've been churning it out, so.
Yeah, I've got a lot of nothing to say. Thanks for watching. Never turn your back.